Ping came at 0312 station time, and I was already awake. I had been awake for 6 hours, so had every operator on the Vorreth deep array. The fold transit signature had lit our long-range lattice at 2147 the previous evening. A displacement bloom 2 ANU out, massive, coordinated, the kind that meant something very large, had just stopped moving very fast. Our algorithms had the fleet count in under 4 minutes, 41 capital vessels, 14 support carriers, a command dreadnought at the center of the formation that our spectrographic suite identified. By its drive signature alone, we had that signature on file. We had had it on file for longer than recorded human history. I keyed the internal line to my deputy, Warrant Sella Orvain, down in the cipher room 3 levels below me. "They're here," I said. "I know," she said. "We've been ready for an hour." That is the thing most people outside this installation do not understand about what happened that. We were not scrambling. There was no alarm, no shouted orders, no one running down corridors. The Vorreth Deep Array had been built for exactly this event, and the people inside it had spent their careers preparing for it. With the calm, patient discipline of people who understood that preparation was the only thing that mattered. When the Vorreth fleet arrived above our planet, we did not reach for weapons first. We reached for 40,000 years of homework. The array itself sits 400 meters below the Carpathian Basin. It was carved into the bedrock during the third expansion, reinforced twice since, and hardened against everything from kinetic impactors to fold transit shockwave. Above it, the city of New Brasov rises in tiers of pale stone and glass, its skyline broken by the berthing spires of the 9th Home Fleet. The Dreadnought class alone, their hulls longer than the old city had been wide. I had watched those ships being built from the observation deck of this installation. When I was a junior analyst 20 years ago, I had understood, even then, what they were for. The Vorreth hail came at 0317. It arrived on the exact frequency our records predicted, a command cipher band, tight beam, directed at Earth's magnetic pole, as their navigation systems had always used for orientation. The cipher itself was a variant of their Tier 2 military address format, the same structure they had used in their interfleet communications 40,000 years ago, when they had last been in this system. Our records indicated they used Tier 2 for what they considered low-threat contact, a world they expected to find empty, or primitive, or broken, something they believed they owned. I listened to the cipher play through my earpiece. Then I looked at Orvain's translation on my secondary screen. It read, "Reclamation Authority Fleet to Seeded World, Designation Harvest 7, Report Current Yield Status. Prepare Surface for Extraction Protocols." I sat with that for a moment. Harvest 7, that was what they had called us. A seeded world, planted and left, meant to be returned to when the conditions were favorable. They had come back to collect something they had left behind 40 millennia ago, fully confident that the thing they had left behind had simply waited. I keyed the transmitter. "Send package 1, I said. "Full cipher, Tier 2 military address format return channel." Orvain said, "Sending." The Vorreth fleet would receive our transmission in approximately 40 seconds at light delay. I watched the orbital display on my main screen while I waited. Above the atmosphere, the 9th Home Fleet had not moved. They were holding station in geosynchronous formation, which placed them in direct line of sight to the Vorreth dreadnought. Not advancing, not powering weapons, simply present, the way a wall is present without needing to announce itself. Package 1 was not a threat. It was not a warning. It was a greeting, composed in flawless Vorreth Tier 2 military address cipher, conforming exactly to their own communication protocols, formatted to the standard their fleet commanders had used before humanity had developed. Writing, it identified this world as sovereign, defended, and fully informed of its history. It noted that we had received their transmission, understood it completely, and wished to open formal dialogue. It also noted, in the same flat administrative tone, that we had been recording their signals for approximately 40,000 years, and that we had something to return to them. I imagine the silence on that drawn knot when the translation finished. I have thought about it many times since. Reply came 11 minutes later. Tier 3 this time, their senior command format, used for what they classified as peer communication. The tone had changed. Not hostile, not fearful. Something I would describe as careful. The way a large animal becomes careful when it steps somewhere unexpected and feels the ground shift. They asked how we had acquired their cipher. I told Orvain to send Package 2. Package 2 was the archive. Not all of it. We were not foolish enough to show the full depth of what we held in, the first exchange. But a representative sample. 400 intercepts drawn from across the 40,000-year span, each time-stamped, each decoded, each cross-referenced to the Vorreth's own internal fleet records, so they could verify the accuracy. Transmissions between their admirals, logistics reports, navigation updates, full strategic assessment of 17 star systems that their high command had conducted 30,000 years ago, which we had decoded within 6 months of receiving it, and had used, in part, to design the defensive architecture of this planet. We had been listening since, before their empire had reached its current borders. We had been learning their language, their tactics, their hierarchy, than most of their current political institutions had existed. I do not know how long it took them to process what they were looking at. I was not watching the clock. I was watching the orbital display, where the Ninth Home Fleet continued to hold station, and beyond them, in the deep scan overlay, the 41 capital vessels of the Vorreth Reclamation Armada hanging in high orbit above a world they had believed was theirs. The next hail came at 0741. 4 hours and 24 minutes after our first exchange. It was Tier 1, their highest command cipher, reserved for communications between fleet commanders and their political authority. In 40,000 years of intercepts, we had received 11 Tier 1 transmissions. We had decoded all of them. This one asked a single question. How long have you known we were coming back? I answered it myself. I did not route it through Orvain. Some messages you want to send in your own voice, even if it travels as encoded signal. I told them the truth. We had detected the first fold transit scout probe they had sent through this system 60 years ago. We had decoded its survey data within a week. We had known from that moment that the reclamation fleet would follow within a century, and we had spent 60 years completing the preparation that the 40,000 before it had begun. Every warship above us had been designed and built with this fleet's specifications in mind. Every defense platform in our orbital shell had been calibrated to the Vorreth capital vessel's shield harmonics, which we had extracted from a maintenance transmission their third reclamation fleet had sent to a repair depot in the Vorreth system. 19,000 years ago. We had not hoped they would not come. We had known they would. We had used the time accordingly. There was a long silence after that transmission. On my screen, I watched the fold transit drives on the Vorreth capital ships begin their charge. Cycle. Not weapons, drives. They were preparing to leave. They held position for another 6 hours. Do not know what was said inside that command dreadnought during those hours. I know what I did. I drank 2 cups of cold coffee, reviewed the archive index that Orvain had prepared for the next package if it was needed, and watched the sun come up through the one exterior camera the array had. A small lens mounted on a ventilation shaft, pointing east, giving a narrow slice of sky above the Carpathian ridgeline. It was a clear morning, the kind we get here in late spring, when the air is still and the light comes in at a low angle and turns everything the color of old bronze. 7 kilometers above me, through the atmosphere I could not see, the warships of the Ninth Home Fleet were holding their station with the same patience they had maintained. All night, they had not fired a single weapon. They had not needed to. At 1352, the fold transit blooms opened above our planet, and the Vorreth fleet stepped through them, one by one, until the deep scan overlay was empty. I sat for a while after that. The cipher room was quiet. Orvain came up from below and stood in the doorway, and neither of us said anything for a time that felt appropriate. Then she said, "Do you think they'll come back?" I thought about it honestly, about their war councils, beast, and what they would spend the next years and decades and perhaps centuries trying to understand about what they had found here, about the archive we held, about the fact that we had answered them in their own language before they had finished speaking. They might, I said, but they'll come back different. I closed the transmission log. The array went back to its standard watch cycle, the way it had every morning for the 60 years I had served in it, and the 40,000 years of patient, silent, disciplined work that had come before any of us were born. We had not fired a shot. We had not needed to. We had simply been ready. And we had remembered. And in the end, those two things had been sufficient. They had seeded us here as livestock, and come back expecting to find what they had left. What they found instead was 40,000 years of homework, and a planet that had never once forgotten where it came from or what was owed.